we actually wanted the 7-inch to be blue, but because the cellophane was red, the printer just made them red. Like that was how little we had, how little control we had in our final product.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, did you know that Midtown just got back together and they're playing a bunch of shows? So you should go look on the Google and see when that shit is. Spoiler alert, they're playing with My Chemical Romance, so it should be pretty easy to find where that shit's going to happen. This week's episode is a repost from an interview I did back in August of 2019, and I'm doing this because I've been just fucking slammed with projects, and I also went to Richmond last week and I hung out with my little sister, so I didn't have time to edit this shit. So I apologize for anyone who's looking for something new, but I've got a ton of interviews that are starting next week that are fucking awesome. I'm really stoked for you to hear them, so just hang tight, wait till next Friday, and fucking relax. Another reason why I wanted to post this is because in any podcast service, I think they all delete after 100 episodes. Anything before that, they get rid of. So you could find all these episodes on thiswasthescene.com, but I think a lot of people don't want to sit there and listen to a streaming player, which kind of helps me in some way because I can repost these episodes, even though a handful of people have listened to them, but there's a bunch of new listeners that didn't know I had these episodes. So this kind of opens the door, too, to how obscure this fucking podcast is and who I'm interviewing. And if you're a Sicko fan, you're going to love this episode. And also, if you are a Sicko fan, you probably are going to like a lot of episodes that I did around this time. So just go research that on the website, check them out. If you don't know who Sicko is, just Google them or go on thiswasthescene.com and put in Sicko and these show notes will show up. But if you don't want to do that, I'm just going to read the bullet points of what we talk about. So here we go. Alan Rappaport being the number one fan, his Misfits t-shirt, empty records, who did their album artwork, having their stuff released digitally on Red Scare Records, switching instruments during their set, the reunion show they played recently being 2019, Frank from Mr. T Experience, and a ton more. That's all I really want to do for an intro, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Thanks for giving me some time, even though it took us, when was the last time we tried to do this, like January?
Yeah. Apologize for not making it a couple times. I have a 16-year-old son who is quite impressed that I'm going to be on a podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So some points with the younger generation.
Doesn't he know about the band though? Does he? Have you played him one of the many albums and like?
I make it sound much cooler than it was.
See, my friends will see it differently. Like, it's like how you're seeing it where you're like, yeah, I don't know, but your son's like, that's super cool. And then my friends are going to be like, holy shit, this is awesome.
That's pretty cool.
I text my buddy. I was like, what question would you want to ask Sicko? And he just hasn't gotten back to me. I'm like, really, dude? Like, what the fuck? I never let anybody know who I'm talking to. But
yeah, that's funny.
So real quick before we get into, I was doing a little research of just like old albums and things like that. And on your Spotify page, did you know there's like this rap group that's mixed in with you guys?
I saw that, and I'm going to contact my lawyer about that, obviously.
Yeah.
And in Spotify they have the number of regular listeners, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a huge number of regular listeners. I'm like, oh, it's probably the rap guy.
It's hilarious, dude. It's called
Yeah.
I Hit 'Em Up because I'm going through all the hits. Because like Bad Ear and The Sprinkler were, even though they weren't like MTV things, those were what I think when people listen to Sicko were top songs. Especially, even looking at like the numbers on Spotify, you get like 30,000 on Bad Ear and Sprinklers. I got like 21,000. But then I Hit 'Em Up's got 5,000 like listens to it, and it's just this. So I'm going through it, and this song comes on. I'm like, wait a minute, what is this?
Man, he's riding our coattails.
Yeah, seriously.
Maybe he's just trying to cross over.
Yeah. All right, man. So the way I structure all these episodes is I like to really go back and kind of see like how you got into music, and then transition it into, getting into the band and you guys touring and any crazy stories that come about and, how it broke up, and really focus on the late 90s into like the early 2000s when I was the era where I was really involved in punk rock, and I had a band that played in that time. And the reason I started this podcast was because I wanted to focus on that time because I thought that after that time period, things got really corporate and everyone was about hairstyles and turtlenecks and fashion and shit. And I think that a lot of us were not even thinking about that crap when we were doing this. But you guys were a band, like I said, that was always in heavy rotation in our cars, in our CD players, which people remember. But do you remember Alan Rappaport from Wayne, New Jersey?
Well, of course, Alan was and may still be the number one Sicko fan.
Yeah. So
No,
okay, go on.
oh yeah, we just saw him. Well, now I guess it's a year and a half ago, but he came out for Ian Sicko's Seattle Pop Punk Festival, and so it was quite a reunion of the old crew, and Alan was there.
No shit, that's awesome.
Yeah.
He got us. He introduced us to you guys. He introduced us to you guys, Zoinks, his band True Zero before like they broke up. Did you guys ever play a show with them, with True Zero?
I think we did when we came through there one time. I seem to think that we did, although I got to tell you, it's a little hazy.
Yeah, that's
some of the '90s, but yeah, Alan was a true supporter.
Yeah, I had him on here early on in when the podcast started because I was focusing strictly on New Jersey, and we were talking about because he was the guy who introduced me and my friends to a lot of bands that when we were listening to, we go into Flipside where he was working, and my friends would want to buy No Effects and Lagwagon, and he'd say, sure. He's like, well, hold on. Have you guys checked out Jimmy Eat World? Have you checked out Mineral? Here's this band Sicko. And he would just broaden our minds to the things that were out there that weren't on the thank you list of the bands that we were listening to.
Well, and that's how it was done back then. I mean, you didn't have Bandcamp, and it was either your friends or pouring through Maximum Rock and Roll to see if there was something that kind of piqued your interest.
Yeah.
But it really depended on fans telling other people, hey, check these guys out.
I know. I wonder I'll still have people recommend bands like that, but I'll kind of stick to my Spotify playlist now because I think like the internet, what it's done really well is separate people from having human connection. And, or I make sure that AI is telling me what to look for, but it does recommend some newer bands that are in my style. But that's what it was back then. And a lot of interviews are when I talk about how people found new bands in their style, it was the thank you list and things like that. But what I want to go back and do this nice little segue here is, go back in time and tell the people listening, like how when you were a kid, what was that? What got you into music, and what was that aha moment where it really caught your attention and you just couldn't shake it?
Well, we were raised. One of my mom's things was you have to play an instrument, so she didn't really care what it was. But even as a 8-9-year-old, we had to pick something, and it's funny. My brother picked the banjo. For whatever reason, he's a bass player now.
He wanted all the girls.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, the banjo's just not pulling him in like the bass will. And I think I tried the violin at one point, and then I happened upon the drums, and for whatever reason, they just made a lot of sense to me. But I remember the first. Actually, my brother was my gateway into a lot of stuff. So. First, it was heavy metal, and I remember one Christmas he got Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne, yep. And he got Diver Down by Van Halen. And I remember, the most kind of current thing that I was listening to back then, I think in 5th grade, was the Go-Go's. Where like, I really liked the Go-Go's for some reason.
Oh hell yeah!
All the way. But I remember he would like leave the house, and I would steal his cassettes and go into my room and listen to Van Halen. So metal was really my kind of foray into popular music, and that's really what kind of captured my attention. I remember all those kind of early 80s metal hair bands because I grew up in Southern California. So, as a 16-year-old, we'd drive and go see Poison in the clubs and stuff like that.
Really?
So,
You actually saw them play on like
oh
something?
yeah. Oh yeah. There was this place in Reseda called the Country Club, and they would often play with Warrant. So Poison and Warrant were a very common bill, and they were the best thing kind of in the clubs at that time. They put on the best show. I mean, it was, Poison was a big event. Of course, they got, enormously huge.
Yeah, a little bit.
And metal was really it until I was probably about 15 or 16. And I was lucky enough to have my brother go off to college and send back mixtapes of, hey, man, I know we listened to metal back in the day, but you really need to check out this, punk rock stuff. And, it was the Replacements and X and Husker Du. And I remember the Angry Samoans and Sonic Youth were on there. And, I go back and I look at those tapes now, and it really was just this catalog of all of the great kind of classic, punk bands of the early 80s and stuff. So I really have to give credit to my brother for, encouraging me on my musical journey.
So there's two things here I really want to kind of dive into. One, first, like, why was it so important for your mom to have you guys play an instrument?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm not really even sure where that on her side of the family seems to have played instruments, but I think she just had this idea that, well brought up children, that a musical education is part of that. I'm not sure where she happened upon that idea.
Out of all the interviews I've done, I've never heard. There was one I did where Doug from this band called The Sleeping, his sister was big into making him sing and like dance and things like that. And
Oh, really?
yeah, and that's like she would like lock him in her room and be like, "You're dancing right now." I forget like exactly how it was, but he was like, "Really?" It was just funny hearing these stories when we were younger of how that transitioned through life. Like, I remember my mom would always come home from work or in the morning. She'd always turn the radio on in the morning, and she'd come home, she'd put on vinyl and just like sit down in front of a speaker in the dark and just like listen to music. So there's this common thread that all of our parents were huge into music. So this is the first time I think I've heard though that someone's parent was like, you have to like play an instrument. I'm so fascinated by this.
Yeah, it was just part of the deal growing up in that house.
That's
But it
awesome.
worked. I mean, both my brother and I continue to play music, even today.
Yeah. Are you still playing drums?
Well, I am. I'm playing in a little number with Denny from Sicko and his wife.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah, they kicked their drummer out about 8 months ago, and but I don't know.
The
I guess
drama never goes away.
I was a logical second choice.
That's awesome. That's cool. You guys still live around each other.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and what was the other? I had another question though. Shit, I totally forgot it. But I like the transition though of your brother sending music back to you from college. Were you one of those metal guys that were? Oh no, actually, I know what the question is, but like, I thought of that one. Were you like one of the metal guys who was wearing like the jean jacket with like the Cinderella button and all that shit? Do you remember those guys?
With the fake sheepskin in
Yeah.
the. So, where I was from, those were more stoners than the metal guys. So
Okay.
there was even kind of subgenres of the metal kids. So I did not have the jean jacket, although I had friends who had the jean jacket.
That's awesome. I remember a kid in my grade who had that. That's why I asked that. Did you, when he was sending back all that music, again, it is a while back when we're talking about deep, but can you kind of remember what what it was about those songs that took you away from, okay, I'm in this genre of music, I'm into metal and Ozzy and all that, but this new stuff isn't metal at all, but it's raw. Like what was like the magnet drawing you over that direction?
That's an interesting question. I mean, as you said, there was a lot of image in some of this stuff, and I think that started to get a little old for me. And I think that what really kind of piqued my interest was the accessibility, where you didn't need a big record label, and you didn't need some music publisher or a magazine or a radio station to make you successful at this, that you could just, have your band and your three chords in your garage, and, you could get into this and do it yourself. And, the speed of the music was certainly, appealing to a 17-year-old. And just kind of that whole do it yourself, like, we can just have bands and play shows, and it doesn't have to be, metal was so kind of focused on making it, and that the AR guy came to your show. And I remember playing in a metal club at the Troubadour, which is a, pretty famous club down there.
Yeah, I've been there.
And, and it was pay to play. Like, you actually had to put up money and then try and sell tickets. And of course, no one's buying tickets to your stupid band on a Tuesday.
Yep.
And it just didn't make sense to me. It was just like, this is crazy. It's so business oriented. And then the punk rock thing, of course, was, just the opposite of that it just didn't matter. It was so kind of unpretentious and non-image focused, although you later learn there's, quite a bit of, image orientedness and, what is punk and all these sorts of things going on. But that was definitely an attraction to me, just the idea that you could do it on your own and have your stupid little band and not have to pay to play.
Did you catch that it wasn't a big, it wasn't similar to metal, because when you went to, because the source of seeing any band on TV was MTV. And when you would hear these, because I remember for me, when I would hear these bands, I'd go on MTV and during the daytime, and it was always the same bands on repeat. But then towards the end, like the midnight era, when there was 120 minutes and all that stuff, you can actually see bands that you wanted to see that you didn't think was possible. But do you think that because it was so hard, like what I'm trying to say is, you're like listening to them, you said that they weren't like these bands where they're, in your face and on TV and things like that. Was it because you were looking on MTV and saying, well, wait a minute, where the hell are they?
Well, it was certainly harder to, see the bands that you liked.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of it. Although it was still pretty hard to come across the content, like we were talking about. It was pouring through little zines and talking to friends and that sort of thing. But, when the bands did come through your town, you could actually go talk to them.
But I thought it was the coolest thing, because I like the fact that you didn't know what the bands looked like unless they were in the liner notes with photos, and sometimes they just would leave themselves out. So they were almost like a mystery, right?
Yeah.
I think that almost kind of worked in their favor. I mean, again, this is all speculation, but just
especially the ugly ones.
Yeah, some of them were definitely not the most.
No, I mean, I remember, like, you'd get your album and you would pore over every word, because that's all you had was that one thing, and maybe it had an insert and maybe it didn't, and you looked at every single picture and every single word. It's so different now, being able to go to YouTube. I mean, I sound like such an old guy.
No, I do the same thing. Same
but
thing.
Even like I'm part of some Van Halen Facebook groups or whatever.
Oh wow!
And the amount of photos that are available to us now, I mean, finding a Van Halen video back in the day, it was impossible. And then all you had was Circus Magazine, or there's just so much more available to us now.
Yeah, it's almost to the point where it's so much availability that it's like Instagram, right? You're just like next, and you're not even sitting there, because when you had that one photo online, that's the only thing you can, or not even online, like in a magazine, you'd stare at it because you're like, this is all I have.
This is all I have. Yeah. I'm starved for my Van Halen photos.
Yeah. I totally remember. I did that with Sunny Day Real Estate. I was like, this is the one image I have of Jeremy Enick. This is crazy.
Yeah. Is it a good picture? I don't really know what he looks like.
I don't even care. He's not even very attractive, but the music makes him a god to me. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
That's true. So, like, what at this point when your brother's sending all the music back to you, were you in high school?
I was in high school. Yep.
So did that transition, like around this time, was there, because were you growing up in the Valley?
I grew up in Simi Valley.
Oh my God! Yeah, I know Simi Valley. Yep.
You know Simi Valley? Yeah.
I lived in the Valley of the Valley. I lived in Tarzana and Reseda for a while, or Canoga Park and Tarzana in like 2000, 2001.
Yeah. Hey, do you remember a place? I think it was on Chatsworth, called Magic World.
I think I do remember this place.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait,
I
what
used to
was?
work.
Well, wait, what was it?
It was like balloons and costumes and magic.
Yes.
Yeah,
Holy
yeah.
shit, I do remember that. Wait, what did you work there when you were
In high school,
oh, okay. Oh my
I
God.
would listen to the mixtapes driving back and forth to Magic World.
Yeah, because that was a bit of a hike going from the valley to Simi Valley.
Yep,
Yeah, the 118, is that what it took there?
118. That's
Yeah.
right, or Santa Susana Pass Road.
Yep. Yeah, and there was the only thing I remember about Simi Valley was there was a junkyard there where the shark from Jaws was that's where he there Bruce. That's where he landed.
I'm impressed that you remember that.
Yeah, there's a sign and there's the entryway, and they took the shark and the mechanical shark, and it's there, like in this. Oh, it was there anyway. Such random information. Um, so like around this time, like when did you start going to local shows, like local punk shows?
Well, that was really so maybe senior year of high school, but I really didn't go to that many shows until I got up here to Seattle in college.
Oh, okay.
And it was Seattle in 1989, 1990 was not a punk town. It was a grunge town.
Yeah.
So, but the grunge guys, I mean, they kind of had a similar thing going, and the whole sub pop thing was certainly getting off the ground at that point. And there was just a real music scene. I mean, there was any weekend you wanted to go out, you could find some band to go see. So
like,
it was a really good town for that.
So, I mean, I remember watching all that from New Jersey because when I started getting to music, Nirvana was like the gateway for me into what I thought was real music, like raw and like what is this crazy shit I'm listening to right now? Because I used to listen to Warrant and Poison and all that, and it was so glam and sugary. And I remember, seeing the movie Singles and all the grunge stuff, and it's the way they portrayed Seattle. Like growing up, like going to college there, did you find that it was portrayed the way that you saw it locally?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it was a lot rawer and a lot more kind of. I mean, I don't know if scary is the word, but more honest and grittier. I mean, Seattle was kind of a gritty town back then. It's not, it's certainly not anymore.
Yeah.
And some people would say, oh, by 89, it wasn't the real Seattle. But there was definitely more of, I mean, do you remember when Guns N' Roses came on the scene and they were like real rock and roll guys and,
Yeah.
not that, I mean, and you look at them and they're still pretty glammy even back then, but there was this real difference of like, these guys have shed this sort of glam, image conscious rock thing, and now they are just like the real rock and roll guys. That's sort of what Seattle felt like to me, like with the Mudhoney's and the Soundgardens and all those bands. There was something kind of more authentic and more gritty, at least,
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, it was real. So like around this time where you're surrounded by this whole sound, like, how did you actually get involved in the band? Like when did you guys get together?
Well, my entire adult existence comes down to one Misfits T-shirt that I bought when I very first came to college, and it's just a classic Misfits T-shirt. And I'm walking across campus, maybe second or third day I was in the state, and this guy Justin kind of walks by me and points at my shirt and says, "Hey man, did you see Danzig when he was in town?" And we struck up a conversation and a friendship. And he was the one who introduced me to Ian and Denny, he knew them from Spokane, and they had all moved back here. And those guys were starting a band. And he mentioned to me that they were looking for a drummer. And then through the band, I met people, future employers, set me on my career trajectory, and also led to me meeting and marrying my wife. So all comes down to that one Misfits T-shirt. But yeah, it was just mutual friends and hearing that they needed a drummer, and they wanted a pop punk band, and everybody in town is wanting to grunge it up.
Yeah,
and so I think they were surprised and encouraged to actually meet someone who knew who Green Day was, and who knew who the Mr. T Experience was, and that sort of thing. So I think we were three of about eight people playing that kind of music in the whole town at that time.
Well, real quick, do you still have the T-shirt?
No, God, no. And I
Damn,
lament
dude.
that fact. I know, right?
Rookie move.
Totally young and dumb.
I was like, fuck, man, he's got to have that like
Plexiglass.
yeah, like on the wall or something like that. That's crazy. So like
No,
when
yeah, go ahead.
no, it's okay. So like you guys, you think about this time period, it's the 90s where it grunge broke up metal and took the complete everything away from that and became the epicenter of everything. And then you guys are in the middle of where that was coming from and we're like, we're going to play a sound that's completely opposite from that.
Yeah, that was pretty smart, right?
Like I mean that's pretty punk rock.
Hey, man. Hey, these guys are, making millions playing music,
Yeah. Fuck
let's play
that
something
shit.
different. Yeah, right. We're not selling out. Yeah, that seems pretty accurate. I mean, I think that we benefited indirectly just from there being so much focus on Seattle and there being so many places to play and so many people were interested in it. But we did our best to, be as unsuccessful as possible, in the midst of all of that stuff that was going on.
So when you guys got together, so your buddy introduced you guys. You obviously had mentioned to him after he saw your shirt, hey, you're like, oh, I play drums because my mom made me, pick an instrument when I'm a kid. And he introduced you to Ian and Denny. So when you guys got together and had your first practice, like, what was that like?
Well, I remember it pretty well. I rode my bike over to kind of this nasty house that one of them was living in, and they had this, old drum set down in the basement, and I just brought my sticks. And I remember the first song we ever played was a song called "Pain in the Ass." I think it was a bonus track on the very first album.
Okay.
But I remember, it seemed pretty easy. I mean, we sort of, I played fast. That's what those guys were looking for. I remember working out how we began the song. So we sort of, collaborated a little bit and came up with a beginning and stuff. And I remember leaving thinking like, man, I can't believe I found these guys. Like, this is, unlike any other band, or people around here don't really want to play this music. Like, this is a total luck that I ran into these guys.
Were you looking? No, go on.
But then we had to wait until I turned 21 so that we could actually go out and play.
Oh, really?
At the time called the Teen Dance Ordinance, which wouldn't let teenagers dance because, it corrupts your soul.
Wait.
And so consequently there were...
Wait.
Yep.
This is like Footloose, where like you couldn't.
It's like Footloose. Somehow they came up with this ordinance that essentially shut down all ages shows in the city. Wow. So you could come out here to the east side, and there was this one place called the Old Firehouse. It was a teen center, and they would put on shows. But I think the OK Hotel was one of the only places that would put on all ages shows.
Wow.
And it was like that through the, certainly well into the late 90s.
How long were you guys? So when you guys got together and you said you walked out saying, I can't believe I found these guys, were you looking to be in a band, or was it something that you just like, well, I play drums and that'd be cool to be in a band, or were you like, I really want to be in a band?
I wasn't really looking. I had actually played in a couple bands in college that really went nowhere, and I don't think ever even played shows. And so it was sort of something that I was kind of interested in doing, but, I was pretty focused on college at the time and, my girlfriend. And so it wasn't really something I was actively looking for. But when the opportunity came around, I thought, oh, this, be fun, and go check that out.
Nice. So when you guys, so what was the first show when you finally turned 21 and could play? Like, what was
well, the first show was a house party up the street from where we practiced. But the first real show was out in Spokane at the Airway Heights Grange. And one of Denny's buddies was he did a book about Spokane, and this was a like a book release party that he was putting on and had us come out to play. So not even like a real, hey, we're on a bill at a show. It was more like a buddies, a buddies party. So that was the first one.
So like when that happened, like what was how many shows in did you guys start to feel like you were getting a bit of a good reception from people?
Oh man, I don't know if I remember that. We started really playing in '91, and the first 7-inch, I think that was in like '93. So, it took us a good couple years, I think, to actually see someone singing like mouthing the words to one of your songs. I do remember the first time seeing that, and I sort of couldn't believe it that someone actually, like, I didn't even know the words to these songs because I couldn't hear them. And then to see someone in the audience actually singing it back, I want to say it took a good couple of years of playing to, get to that point.
How often were you guys playing? Were you playing every weekend, or were you kind of spreading it out because of college and all that?
Yeah, we were playing maybe once or twice a month was probably what we were doing.
That sounds about kind
That's
of right.
good.
Yeah.
It's enough. But we all three were, I mean, I think we benefited from all three being into heavy metal as youngsters, because we sort of took the musicianship and the practicing seriously. And although we were playing punk rock, we were trying to do it as well as we could. And so, we'd practice a couple times a week. And that kind of music to play really well takes practice and, to get really tight with each other. So, we played a lot, looking back on it. But yeah, we'd only play, I think, once or twice a month. Of course, when you go on tour, if you don't play, you don't make any money. So we would play, 6 out of 7 days on tour easily.
Yeah.
Which now seems like I would die after.
I know, dude. My old band, like we went on tour like a handful of times, but I'm thinking back now, I'm like, there's no way I could even.
Could you imagine?
Oh, dude, no. It gives me like anxiety.
How long it would take you to recover?
Oh man, I mean, it's just being like place to place and in a van, just sitting there doing jack shit for 10 hours and then showing up and then waiting. Like, I have to go on at like 10. I want to be fucking in sleep by then. Like,
I know.
You're
I know.
kidding me.
And your diet's terrible.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you're just like living off like 7-Eleven and the whatever the hell is in like the rolling and the hot dog thing or whatever and chips. Oh my God.
Yeah, JoJo's and chocolate milk.
Oh God, it was the fucking worst. I think we were in our 20s into that shit. But like when you guys practiced, did you have like a specific style when you practice where would you go through just a solid set and repeat it over and over, or would you go through a song and stop in the middle and say, hey, let's smooth this out, or was it just like, let's go through it once, go smoke some cigarettes, drink some beers, come back in, do it a set again, and be like, all right, we're done?
Well, it kind of depended, right? Like, if you're getting ready for a show, we would often practice the set that we were going to play, just to make sure that, whatever songs that we wanted to play, we could play. Often, you'd work on a song, but we would probably only play it maybe 2 or 3 times, and then you'd come back the next time. And enough repetition, you sort of get to the point where you figured it all out and it's all been smoothed out and that kind of thing. But then later, I think we had played for so long together and played so many shows at that point that we could just sit down and kind of write out a set list from the, database of of songs that we had, and we could get through most of them.
Were you guys were you guys on the same page of how you wanted the band to be presented live? Because when I heard the band, I felt like it was kind of like I don't know if I can say this right. Like there was there was a care in what you were doing, but you guys had really good hooks, but there was also kind of a like I say, a snottiness to it, but like it kind of it's like a joking aspect, but there was structure to the songs and in like hooks and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a lot less kind of planned than you might think. I mean, I think that was more a product just of our kind of
But
personalities
that's what I'm
because,
getting to, because that's what I think it was. You guys weren't trying to get that sound. It was just your personalities that were completely coming out in the sound.
yeah, I mean, there was no kind of, hey, this is sort of how we should present ourselves as show. I mean, there was never any, I don't think we were sophisticated enough to even have that be part of our thinking. Like we were just coming up with these songs, then wanted to have a good time playing them. And, it was just sort of a organic, like we just jump around and have a good time while we're playing more than it was kind of considered. Um,
W-
but I'm glad it came off as planned
Oh, it totally
or
came off. I mean,
or thoughtful.
even when I look at like any of the photos of you guys and they're captured on, because when I'm going through Google and I'm looking at band photos, I remember seeing these back then and just thinking like, wow, these guys are just like super laid back. They're just having fun with this, and that's what always drew me to a band. I hated the bands that were looking intently in the camera or someone's looking off to the side as I'm like, don't set this up. Just get a snapshot of you guys just being around each other as buddies. And that's what I always loved. And that's what I got when I saw photos of you guys.
Well, yeah, I mean that's cool, and I think we were also not trying to make a point, or we weren't political.
Yeah.
We didn't really have any kind of like it was if you listen to the songs those guys wrote, it's mostly kind of slice of life, sort of
Yeah.
almost a meaningless $80 about an $80 tuner that broke.
Yeah.
Um,
It was very tongue in
and
cheek almost.
yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It was. There was definitely humor was a part of it, but then that's kind of just sort of our outlook in general, I think.
Well, it's funny, like jumping in, I'm gonna jump back real quick, but I remember hearing Rehashed, and that's like with the Tom intro and like the dun, dun, dun,
Yep.
dun. Yeah, I remember hearing that because I like very melancholy stuff and I mean, obviously I said Sunny Day Real Estate before. Like I like very moody, melodic stuff, and when I heard that's probably one of my favorite Sicko songs because it was like probably the darkest Sicko song I think I've ever heard out of the entire catalog you guys have.
Well, yeah, that's Denny for you. He sort of had that sort of bittersweet kind of thing going, but you sort of get that same vibe out of a song like Sprinkler.
Yeah.
Was always very kind of melancholy and kind of nostalgic. He wrote this song that's on the Red 7-inch called "Count Me Out,"
Hmm.
which is sort of sad and doesn't have any friends. Poor Denny.
Poor Denny.
Poor Denny.
No, but like I didn't. But I was when I heard that, that's what made me want to go out and get Laugh All You Can, Monkey Boy, because I thought a lot of the songs on there were gonna be like that, and it was like, and I was like, oh, they're not. But then then Bad Years on there, which I think is like one of the like that and the Sprinkler, I think were like the the songs that a lot of people remember.
Oh
But
yeah.
I would I like kind of going off on a tangent here, but I just felt like a lot of the songs you guys had were completely opposite. They were just fun and just like you guys weren't even you guys I would say weren't trying. I feel like that takes away from it, but you were just kind of like, hey, this is just this is the shit we do, and it just they're really catchy. So
Well, there was definitely not taking yourself too seriously was
oh
definitely
yeah.
part of the part of the thing, and that probably came across a little bit as well.
How'd you guys get on Empty Records? Because you basically stayed there through the entirety of the band until Mutant Pop, unless Empty became Mutant Pop, and I just didn't know about that.
No, totally different.
Okay, so tell me about Empty
So
Records, like how you guys got on that.
yeah, so Empty was run by this guy named Blake, and he was actually friends with Denny's sister Jill, and they had known each other from I don't know previous lives or whatever. And Empty, while not pop punk necessarily, at least most of the bands, it was more kind of drunk punk,
Okay.
but definitely more of a punk rock thing than what was going on over at Sub Pop or CZ Records or those kind of places. So we sort of saw Empty as kind of our best chance at getting on a local label, just from a fit perspective. And so this is a true story. So so as you might imagine, any small label in the early 90s in Seattle was inundated by bands wanting to get put out because it was this hot new, musical center.
Oh yeah.
So Blake would just get hundreds of cassette tapes. So Jill, and this is a true story, took a bottle of booze over and sat him down and said, "We're going to drink and listen to my little brother's band." And that's how he heard our band. And then so he decides he's going to put out a 7-inch for us. And he got Kurt Bloch of the Fastbacks fame to produce it or to record it for us. And I was a huge Fastbacks fan, obviously still am. And I remember thinking this is it. We've made it. Like there is no higher accomplishment that we will ever have than putting this 7-inch out with Kurt Bloch recording us. I mean, I thought we were going to play the Fabulous Forum next. I mean, I really thought that we'd hit the pinnacle of the most we could ever do. I was just, shocked that it had come together like that. But that's how it went.
Did you feel like it was, I mean, granted it was about, 2 years after you guys formed when this happened, or a year?
Yeah, a couple of years. We had put out a self-funded 4-band 7-inch, and 2 of the bands decided after we, pressed them that they weren't going to pay for it.
Oh, that's
so it was, totally typical, small band stuff. So, we had tried, to put out our own 7-inches, but we just didn't have the notoriety, because back then, you would see a band on the same label as some band you liked, and you're like, well, I'm going to pick this up just because it's on this label.
That was the thing back then. I mean, that was your gateway of, well, if this band is on this label, I guess more bands on this label will sound like that. And then you get 10 records, and 2 out of the 10 are the one you wanted, and the other ones are like, oh, what the?
I can't believe they put this out.
What the fuck is this?
I think we were that band on Empty, because if you were into the Derelicts and then thought you were going to get the same stuff out of Sicko, you're probably pretty disappointed.
Yeah, I was like, what the shit?
Yeah, this isn't drunk at all.
How did you guys come across the artwork? Because all of your CDs are basically drawn, or they all are drawn, and you have a very specific logo of the name. So did that all come up? Because that came from the first record. You could feel the love of
first
this
7-inch. So this again, I often think that we sort of did a lot of stuff right unwittingly with Sicko. We sort of didn't know. So the story is it's this local cartoon artist named Jason Lutz, who was a friend, I think, of Denny's girlfriend at the time. And he did this great cartoon called Jar of Fools. And so we convinced him to do this 7-inch for us. He came up with those, with the Sicko, the characters or whatever. He came up with the logo. We had literally, I think, no input into what he was doing other than, here's an example. So when he did the art, he did the cellophane layovers. It wasn't digital back then, so he was actually doing the layovers for the different colors for the printer.
Oh yeah.
And the cellophane itself was red. We actually wanted the 7-inch to be blue, but because the cellophane was red, the printer just made them red. Like that was how little we had, how little control we had in our final product.
That's so funny, man.
Yeah. So, and now we call it the red 7-inch, but it was supposed to have been a blue 7-inch. So he came up with all that, and then he did the first album, So You Can Feel Love in This Room. He did that one as well. And then Denny's sister did The Monkees.
Okay.
And then this guy named Pablo did Chef Boy Are You Dumb? And then Joe Newton of Gas Huffer fame did You're Not the Boss of Me.
Oh wow, I didn't realize you had different artists.
Yeah, it was different artists, but it just sort of set, like Jason Lutz just sort of set the tone, and then we just continued it because we had no better idea.
I mean, it kind of made sense because you guys were, from what I'm hearing and like the sound, is like you guys were kind of a bunch of characters in a sense. I mean, just like 3 dudes who were just kind of just like whatever. So I felt like the artwork really encompassed who you guys were, even though like the logo, the Sicko logo, is very sharp and jagged. It's still almost like a tongue-in-cheek version it like I feel like it goes because I've been a graphic designer for like a while, so I look at things and visuals to me match the tone of what something is, like the branding or whatever.
Yeah.
And but I felt like it really just like came across like to really represent you guys pretty well or very
Yeah,
well.
I think it did, but I assure you that was not planned. It was not like some kind of you know, corporate plan
It wasn't like
that
a
we were
band meeting
executing.
where you guys were like, all
No,
right, what's what we're gonna
no,
do?
no. It was like, hey, Jason's going to do our 7 inch. Like, oh, hey, that's really cool. We should make a T-shirt out of that. And it just kind of worked out that it really did, fit our band, and it became kind of this. It helps that it's a very distinctive looking kind of design that he did.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and yeah, so it's actually really cool. And in fact, I will. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to tell this to your listening audience.
You can say whatever
But
you
we're
want,
gonna
Josh.
we'll see whatever we're gonna release or kind of a retrospective, kind of a compilation of old Sicko songs, and we got Jason to come back and do the cover
Oh,
of
that's
this one.
fucking awesome.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that'll be out, I think, kind of September timeframe on Red Scare Records.
Oh, bad. Wait, Red Scare. That's Brendan Kelly and Toby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually, quite a few years now ago, Toby re-released all of our stuff digitally, so that's how we ended up on iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, actually, I
Yeah.
just interviewed Brendan, man, like
Yeah.
15, whatever. Like, yeah, the last tour we went on was with his old band, or old still band, Lawrence Arms. I guess, like,
Mhm.
I guess they're still.
So are you still playing?
No, actually did a reunion show last year because the podcast kind of got some people reminiscing about the Jersey scene. So that was cool. We ended up putting out our first record out on vinyl, which was super fucking awesome. I got to just design that, and we did like an etching and stuff. So it's cool when you can, because there's like people are really remembering this time period, and it's cool that there's all these bands playing these reunion shows and then doing these re-releases because you can, due to the whole digital thing. It's really just if you have the masters, you can host it somewhere, and then it just shoots it off to Spotify and all these other places where people can download it and buy it and things like that,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah,
super
I mean,
awesome.
there's a whole thriving pop punk scene up here in Seattle now. It's crazy to see.
So and I want to actually talk about that in a bit, but when you guys put out You Can Feel the Love in This Room, did you guys start touring on that or on Count Me Out?
Well, we would do kind of small regional trips, like maybe down the coast to San Francisco and LA and back, or out to Spokane and back, and that sort of thing. But yeah, You Can Feel the Love in This Room was the first time that we attempted a national tour. And it's a total fiasco most of the time. Nobody knew who we were. Played with metal bands most of the time. I remember our tour manager gave us directions coming from the opposite direction. So we're like driving down the road and we start seeing exits that are on our paper, but from, out of order, and, no cell phones, no digital maps. I mean, it's just us and our Thomas guide trying to find our way. So it's
That's how it was done, man.
crazy way.
That is
That
how
was how it was done.
yeah, it
That was
was.
how it was done.
First day of tour was showing up to a gas station, buying a map of the United States if you didn't have the previous one, and
That's right.
you wanted the updated one. So when you're driving, the exits were still the same, or they hadn't changed anything in developing the
It is.
highways.
Yeah, it's inconceivable now that you would actually venture out of your house without a route, pre-planned for you. But I guess we did it.
Oh my God, I have like my map up on my phone where I'm going like 3 blocks away to a bar. I'm just like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Please take
yeah,
me there. Take me
yeah.
there, iPhone.
That's right.
What so when you guys were I mean again like anyone listening, I mean this is like 94.
Yeah,
So,
94, 95. That's when we did most of it. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean this is the time period when I mean what was it? Was Dookie even out at this point or were you a couple years
Dookie
away?
wasn't out. No, Dookie wasn't out. So they had that. what is it, the 1039,
Yeah,
or
10,000
39,
slap happy,
yeah, 39
slapping it.
smooth or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They had that, and then Kerplunk came out,
Yep.
and at that point, they were. I remember hearing stories of them driving around with $60,000 in cash in their van because they were making so much money on their tour.
Jesus.
But yeah, Dookie was. I guess we could look it up on the internet, but I think it was a little bit after that because Green Day was just another. I mean, they were successful, but they were just another band in the scene. I had a brother who played in the Mr. T Experience,
Okay.
and we would go see Green Day open for them. I mean, like the Mr. T Experience was the bigger band at the time.
Yeah, because Lookout and all that.
Yeah, because of Lookout and all that. So
Yeah, actually, it says February 1st, 94. So you guys, so that was, you guys did put that out the same year when
yep.
that started getting big. So which is like, which is so crazy because I mean, again, we're going back to the beginning when we're talking about the Seattle scene. I mean, that was the grunge scene in the early '90s, and that was this huge thing. So when punk, I was listening to the No Effects book the other day. Did you get a chance? Have you ever heard that at all?
No, I haven't.
It is fucking amazing if just to hear how fucked up these guys were and the stories from back then. It's amazing. But they talk about that era a lot when like Nirvana came out and they were thinking, oh shit, like this is really gonna help us. And then when Dookie came out, they were like, we are at the perfect place at the perfect time. And I think a lot of bands thought that when they were trying to make something like kind of a, hey, I also want to do this full time,
Yeah.
So like,
and then they figure out there is only one Green Day.
Yeah, you're like, oh wait,
So,
they had the spot. Shit.
Yeah, man, that's not our band.
Did you guys want to, you're going out on tour and you're putting out records and did you guys have a band meeting at one point and say like, all right, we really let's go for it, or it was, this is kind of fun, like kind of like the tone of the band, like, yeah, we kind of go out and we come home and do some shit and we kind of go out whenever we want. Like, what was the direction that you guys had an agreement on?
Well, again, it was much more organic than than maybe it appeared. You remember when Jawbreaker signed and they did Dear You.
Yeah.
The don't sell out vibe was, you could taste it. I mean, it was such a big deal in our scene to not sell out. And I think we all kind of, and in retrospect, is kind of a stupid attitude. I will say that we definitely had that attitude of not wanting to sell out, but then I would also say that there wasn't a lot of people buying. So it's not like we were turning down record contracts or anything. At the same time, we weren't really trying.
But did you guys, okay, so it was like, what was like the not the day by day, but you guys go out and tour and come back, where was it just, we go out on tour, we book it ourselves, we go out on tour for a couple weeks and we come back home and we work some jobs and then we just kind of go out again? Or was it more, hey, when we get home, let's get out again because we want to just kind of be on the road a lot?
I think those guys probably wanted to tour more than I did. I was sort of more of the stay at home, kind of attitude. No, it was not like, remember the band Pop Defect? Like those guys would tour, 10 months out of the year.
Okay.
I remember hearing about the Descendants decided to live in somewhere like in Missouri because it was more central for touring. So
it makes sense.
I mean, we were never like that. No, it was much more kind of laid back. All of our tours were based around, releasing albums and that kind of thing. So it was never, because we'd have to come back from tour and get jobs again.
Yeah.
So it was quite a lift to, I mean, half the time you'd move out of where you were living because you couldn't make rent while you were gone or whatever. And then have to come back and put it all together. So there was an effort to it, which I think prevented us from, doing it a whole bunch.
Now, like, how did you guys come up with the whole theme? Because I've read that you guys, when you played, you were one song after the other. So you'd have a 20-song set, or was it 20? It was like 15 songs, and it would take you 40 minutes, but it would be one song right into the next, and then Ian and Denny would switch off and play each other's.
Oh, man. I wish that were true. Those guys would tune so much in between. I don't know what the point of being in tune is, but they were very focused on being in tune. So like I would watch like the Mr. T Experience, and they would have, one song into the next song into the next song, and then they would pause and, a little banter, and then they'd play three songs in a row. I don't think we ever got to that point. But it is true that the songs that, say, Denny would write, he would sing and play guitar on. And then the songs that Ian would write, he would play guitar and sing on. So we would do half a set of one guy and then switch in the middle and half a set. And then we would alternate who would play first.
Did you
That's
ever
kind of how it worked.
did you ever get up and play guitar or bass when they played drums?
No, so there's a song on Laugh While You Can, Monkey Boy, called What's On at the very end.
Yeah.
It's very slow. I played bass on that, and Ian played drums.
Did you ever play that live like that?
Maybe, but I feel very uncomfortable standing up there in front of a bunch of people. So it was never a regular thing.
Do you remember any one of like one of the craziest shows you guys had on tour? I mean, it's a very broad question because that could be a fight could have broken out, or you had like 2,000 people for some random reason. But like for you, like what stood out to you as one of the craziest
Well, there's
shows?
a few. So I will say that You Can Feel the Love in This Room came from a real show at this place called the Hoedown Center in Richland, Washington. And, we were right in the middle of playing, and a fight broke out, and they took it outside, and like the entire room emptied as we were playing. And we sort of didn't know what was going on. Like all of a sudden everyone's leaving. And I think Denny even, leaned over and said, "Boy, you can really feel the love in this room." So things like that would happen. I think the most amazing shows were we toured Japan a couple times.
Wow.
And we played with this band called Husking Bee. You ever heard of them?
No.
You should check them out.
Okay.
Really melodic Japanese punk rock. And they were huge over there. And so they would sell out. Like we had a 3-night sold out stand at this club in Tokyo. And they'd attract 800 people. And I mean, we'd never played in front of people like that. So those shows probably stand out to me as some of the best shows we ever played. And then there was a show at Coney Island High in New York City that for, I don't know why, but several hundred people showed up to see us. And it was insane. But I think probably one of the craziest things that ever happened was, and I hope this isn't a family podcast.
No, it's definitely not.
But we were playing in Vancouver, British Columbia with Cub. Do you remember that band?
It's similar.
So we're playing, and this guy gets up on stage and pulls his pants down and starts pouring beer down the crack of his ass, and then kind of half-heartedly attempted to stick the beer bottle up his butt, and then decided better of it and threw it into the audience, at which point it was like the parting of the Red Sea. Nobody wanted to get hit with this soiled bottle. I just sort of couldn't believe it. Oh, and there was another show. So my wife, bless her heart, doesn't take any shit. And we're playing a show at the Crocodile Cafe, and I'm playing, and I look out and I see her facing off with some dude, like, he probably bumped into her or spilled his drink on her or something. And I see her like with this beer bottle, like cocked and ready to bash over this guy's head. And I remember playing the song and sort of like calmly thinking to myself, am I going to have to stop playing in the middle of this song to go and, intervene in my wife's confrontation? But happily I did.
I can't imagine this happening at a Sicko show.
I don't know where that guy came. He probably thought he was coming to see the Derelicts.
Yeah, it's like I don't see you guys really bringing out that emotional side of people where they're like, I'm just gonna rage right now. Like,
yes, no, there was not a lot of raging. You're right. It was unusual. That's why it stands out, right? For some bands, it would be like, oh, that happens every night.
So we're about an hour. I want to make sure that you're cool with time. I don't want to,
No, we're good.
Okay, cool. So like when you guys were, coming back and recording all the other albums, like when you guys did like Bad Year and The Sprinkler and all that, did you guys kind of have an idea that those songs were standing out and, would be the songs that people were really, going to remember? I mean, it's a broad question to be like, years later,
Yeah.
is that, but like when you did them, we were like, fuck, man, that's a good song. This is
Yeah.
catchy.
I mean, you would get some idea from playing shows and which ones people responded to. And I certainly had, the ones that I liked and thought were better songs. Sprinkler was by far the most, like if people came up and said, hey, will you play this song tonight? It was always The Sprinkler.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't kind of foresee that was going to be sort of the big one on the record. And it's like, that sixth or seventh song it's buried on the first side of one of these records. So no, I don't think we had that sense. But I also think sometimes like you record a song, and I think that song is like that. And I think Bad Year is like it, where it's sort of the best time you ever played it. And it sort of gets this quality that you didn't necessarily try to get, but somehow everything kind of came together and it just sort of worked. And those songs, I don't know, like I sometimes, listen to those songs and I wonder if we ever played it better than what was on the record. Certainly if you look at, live shows, we didn't. But there's a lot going on in a live show. You're not really concentrating on the music all that much.
Was there any other songs that you thought that you loved playing live that weren't, where people typically didn't think of that as like a standout song, but you enjoyed it, like playing it a lot?
It's more the opposite, where people liked it and I didn't like to play them. Because they're too fast or whatever.
Okay. So like,
excuse me.
It's okay. Like, but like, were there any songs though that you wanted to play more of that you guys just chose not to? Because you guys have a lot of fucking songs.
We have a lot of songs.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if I could think of any. I mean, the ones that you think are the hits are the ones that people like. Where I Live is a great song to play. Super fun, super straightforward. Hits all the punk rock check boxes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Just like you personally, where you were like, you guys go on
personally?
tour, like, oh man, I really love playing this song.
No.
You're
No,
like,
I
I
wish
don't
I
like any of the songs.
I liked them all. I mean, they're fun songs to play. At this point, I'm a little old for that, and they're hard. it's a young man's sport, but no, they're good songs. Are there any? No, I can only think of the ones that I didn't like to play. But we don't need to talk about that.
That's okay. I don't want to ruin anyone. They're like, what the fuck, man? I love that song. You're like, yeah.
Well, so they'd want to play like two super fast ones back to back.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I need a break, man.
Yeah.
Catch my.
That's how you do it, man. You make the set, you start off strong, and then you level it out in the middle with some slow songs, or kind of bring it down just so the drummer and the band members can be like, all right, we can fucking breathe now. And then
well, and there's a real trick when you're a drummer, that there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong on a drum set that might need tightening, and so you pretend that you're like messing with your hi-hat, like, oh, there's something wrong with my hi-hat, but really I'm just catching my breath.
Interesting.
It's a drummer trick.
I feel like my drummer Sean probably did that plenty of times, where I'd look back, I'm like, you don't need to move your tom anymore, it's close enough. Like,
he's like, dude, I'm gonna pass out if I don't spend 30 seconds adjusting this tom.
Oh my God. It's just like you saying how Ian and Tenny were constantly tuning. I'm surprised you were bummed about that, because it sounds like you wanted some breathing room.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, thank God that E sounds
Yeah,
flat
no, I mean,
right now.
That's probably true.
How did you guys, so I know you mentioned at the beginning, but like talk about like meeting Alan, like the number one Sicko fan in the entire existence of Sicko.
How did we meet Alan? Well, I remember, I think he was in touch with us because, he worked at his record store.
Flipside.
And yeah, Flipside. And I think he and Ian had kind of contacted each other. And then when we were out there on tour, that's when we actually like met him in person and stayed at his house, and he showed us his Sicko tattoo.
Oh, wow. Where is that? Is that on his arm?
Yeah, it's amazing.
I hope.
Yeah, he wouldn't show us the other Sicko tattoo.
I don't know.
But then we weren't dating at the time.
Yeah,
But he was just one of these, he's one of these guys who is, super enthusiastic and really into our band, which was not a common, you just don't run into people who are super passionate about your stuff. And he was one of them. It was pretty.
That's the thing. That's why when Alan recommended you guys is why it stood out to us, because he's not a guy that especially me, because it was like my friends were really into a lot of punk bands and I was not. So to impress my friends, that was a giant feat. And then to watch them try to impress Alan and Alan dismiss them, I was really paying attention to that, because he was just like, yeah, I don't, fuck that band. Or we were like, oh, it's the best band ever. He's like, really? And when someone did that, who was older than us, like he was like, I think like 3 or 4 years older than us, there was something to that. And so when he would geek out over a band, we really would pay attention.
And it meant something, yeah.
Yeah, because you're like, wait, if this guy can't, like, it's hard to get him to crack on anything. And to watch his excitement talking about, again, like he would talk about Zoinks, Jill, who else did he talk? Like Jimmy Eat World, when Static Prevails came out, he introduced us to that and these different bands. But when he talked about you guys, so that's why we would really pay attention to, and I think that's why all these bands, especially you guys, became so big to us, because he was super stoked on it. So we're like, we really got to pay attention to this. There's something here, then some of the bands he would recommend, I was like, I don't know, I'm not like a big fan of. But like when I heard you guys, I was like, oh man, like I fucking, I dig this shit. Like as I'm listening to like Deftones and stuff back then, which I'm, whatever. I'm not ashamed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a similar, as I said, a similar relationship with my brother, where he would say, hey man, check out these bands. And it meant more than just one of my dumb friends saying it.
Yeah.
Just because I respected, his opinion, and he knew a lot more about it, and, was in the scene and all that. So yeah, I mean, that was the deal. Find people who you trust or labels that you like. And that was your pathway into the music.
Yeah. There was like a respect to it. You're like, okay, I trust this. When you guys, so like, years later, you guys do, You're Not the Boss of Me. And so tell me about how that transitioned over. So at this point, you guys went from doing 1, 2, 3, 4. So you did 4 records on Empty Records, which seemed like obviously you had a good relationship with them up until that point. And not saying that it wasn't a bad relationship going to Mutant Pop, but like, how did you guys transition off of that into going into doing your last record on Mutant Pop?
Well, that was sort of it was really kind of an afterthought. So the band pretty much had wrapped up by the time that Mutant Pop thing came out, and it was kind of like this. The last part of that is what was supposed to have been the last live show, and Tim from Mutant Pop was just a fan of the band, and I remember he sort of considered putting out records as sort of the highest form of collecting records, which I always thought was an interesting perspective. But he just contacted us because we had put out a 7-inch, I think, with a song called 3T on it.
Yep.
And he was like, hey, do you guys want put out sort of an outtakes and a collection of songs, and let's do a record together. So that was sort of almost a posthumous kind of release, as I remember it. So it wasn't sort of like leaving one label to go to another. I think we had pretty much wrapped the band up, and then he just kind of came around and said, let's do this project.
So you guys were done at this point. You had just decided after years, because this was like 2000 when you guys did that.
Yeah.
And you put out You Can Feel the Love in This Room in 94. So you're 6 years into the run. And at this point, you guys are just like, I think, what were you, in your early 20s at this point?
Late 20s. So yeah, I would say by 98, 99, I was 27, 28 kind of age. Those guys were a little older. I think Ian's a year, Denny's 2 years older. So we were coming up on 30. And when you're in your late 20s, you think that's pretty old.
I know. It's so funny.
And, we had situations like, I'd be playing this all ages show, and some kid would come up to me and say, hey, you work with my mom. and they'd point at the records and they'd say, is that a poster? So we sort of had this sense that like, and then you'd go to Japan and they were super into it, and you'd play to all these huge shows because obviously we were playing with a really successful band. And then we'd come back here and play to 10 people again. And, the parallels between our band and Spinal Tap really became palpable, that we just sort of felt like, well, we can keep doing this same thing. Like nothing was going to change. We would still, and not that it was bad necessarily, but it just sort of had run its course, I remember feeling. I kind of regret at this point that we didn't just put it on hold and, we sort of made a point to break up, which is kind of stupid. In retrospect, we could have just decided like, hey, let's just not do this for a couple of years.
I think a lot of bands feel that, or they're seeing that now, because I think a band breaking up is the stupidest thing ever, because even Jawbreaker now, they just go, and you guys got back together, what, a couple years ago? And
a couple years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I saw there was a video on YouTube where you guys are playing live.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that to say you're completely broken up, I think a lot of bands are realizing that it's fucking dumb, because they'll say that it's concrete, and now they're realizing even a decade later or a couple years later that they'll play a show and they feel almost weird to do that, because they made such a declaration that it was over and final. But I think even seeing Jawbreaker get back together opened up a lot of doors for people who are going, well, he was really adamant about them not doing that. And now they're like, we're on our 5th tour now.
They seem pretty angry at each other at the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, they definitely seem kind of pissed off.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, I don't know what like a public declaration of like we're going to break up. I don't know what that does. Like what useful service that provides.
It does nothing. I mean, it's all
well, exactly.
It's ego. It's pure like I'm making. Because if you're in a band, you have some kind of an artistic sense, or there's some emotional shit going on there where it's all poetic and bullshit. So
yeah. I mean, I think we got pissed off at each other and decided we'd had enough.
Like, did you guys? What was the inner? For 6 years being on the road and stuff, like, what was the inner dialogue? What am I trying to say here? Like, how did you guys get along?
We got along pretty well. I think we had our moments. I think all of us, have aspects of our personality that are annoying. We did have a sit down at one point early in the band, and we're like, look, you guys, if we don't get along, this band is going to be over. And this was probably in the first year or two of the band. That's the only time that I can remember like really having to sit down and sort of have an intervention with each other.
Yeah.
But, we'd get pissed off. I mean, we'd get angry at each other, but it's sort of like, I mean, maybe this is cliche to say, but like you can be pissed off at your brother, but he's still your brother.
Yeah.
That's sort of how it got to with us. Like, yeah, we can get pissed off with each other, but we're still in this band together. And so I think we actually got along, for the most part, pretty well.
Yeah. It's like we can get pissed off at each other, but we still have to see each other every Christmas. So
yeah. And I still have to play that show with you next weekend, so I better not be too pissed off.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, let me see. How did you guys officially break up?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm trying to remember. I think Ian and I got in some sort of argument with Denny, and Denny, was like, well, fuck this. Like, maybe we just quit or whatever. And we're like, oh yeah, okay. We're, it's over. I think it was something, I don't even remember. It was so dumb and long ago.
19 years ago.
I know, right? It's crazy.
Did you guys ever play any shows, like when you guys broke up? Because you all stayed in Washington, pretty much around the same place that, like, not too far from Seattle, right?
Yeah. Ian spent some time getting a graduate degree at Oxford, and then he's moved back since then. So yeah, we're all still in the area.
What brought you guys back together a couple years ago to play out?
Well, it was Ian's pop punk festival. So, he did this little record label called Top Drawer Records back in the day. And he released back then an album called 13 Soda Punks, PUNX. It was a compilation of 13 punk rock bands. And back then, I think only 2 or 3 of them were from Seattle. Like he had to go to Vancouver and the Bay Area to get enough bands to fill up his compilation. And so I don't know if he's had like a midlife crisis recently, but he decided that he's going to start the label back up. And so he released a couple of years ago a follow-up compilation called 14 Soda Punks. And amazingly, all 14 of these bands are Seattle bands. So that gives you an idea of the difference in how many pop punk bands there are now.
Yeah.
And so he decided as kind of a record release thing to do a Seattle pop punk festival and have all of those bands play over a couple nights. So he called us up and he's like, hey, would you guys consider, and he's being totally diplomatic and, kind of political about it. We only have to play, 2 or 3 songs. We don't even have to, publicize it. No big deal, whatever. And I thought, I haven't played the drums in 15 years. Like, it's going to take so much effort to be able to play those songs again. I'm not going to put in the effort to just play 2 or 3 songs. So I was like, hey, let's just practice up, play a full set. It'll be kind of, a cool reunion thing for the pop punk festival. So that's what we did. But that's really why. It was just to support Ian and his record label.
How'd you guys like it? Like, how'd you guys enjoy the show?
It was pretty sweaty. No, it was actually really fun. It was great to. I mean, I practiced by myself for a month.
Wow. Just
to be able to play those songs again. But love playing with those guys. They're, it's super fun. It was great to play those songs again. And then so many people came from such crazy distances.
I was going to ask you that. Like, what was like a crazy distance that someone came from?
Well, Alan came from, New Jersey.
Yeah.
We had people from Denver, Texas, California. I mean, people flew in to come to this pop punk festival. So, it's not all Sicko drawing them in. But it was pretty amazing. And what's so crazy about playing now, especially, when Sicko goes out, is like all the people from the scene who you might not have seen for a decade, like they all show up, and we're all a little older and we're all a little fatter. But for a moment, it's the same people and the same band and the same music in the same space as you used to be. And it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's something wild about that. It is a different vibe because back then it was just really baggy clothed punk kids or whatever, whatever style they were, just sitting there with their arms crossed. They didn't know you, and if they knew you, they were going nuts. And then now they sit there and just like raise their beers in the air and don't really move, yeah. But they sing the songs back to you.
But they sing the songs and they're glad that it's over at 10:30.
Yeah, oh man, that's like the biggest thing. Everyone's like, "Oh man, the band's going on at 9?
Yeah.
Fuck, yeah. We'll start the show at 4.
I'm gonna have to pace myself."
Yeah. All right, so a couple more questions to let you go. What is the picture? Is this you with a British flag shirt on in this doorway?
No, that is Frank from the Mr. T Experience.
Okay, I was like, what's the story behind that?
That shirt was left over from when my brother and I were into Def Leppard, and we actually had sleeveless Union Jack shirts that we had bought on Carnaby Street in London.
Amazing.
And that is Frank wearing my brother's Union Jack shirt.
That's like what the drummer used to wear before he lost his arm.
It was the singer.
Wait a minute.
Joe Elliott.
Joe Elliott. Did he really?
The drummer would wear, and I can't believe I know this, but like Union Jack boxers. Yeah, Joe Elliott was the one who wore the sleeveless Union Jack shirt.
Yes, I completely remember that too. What's the picture that you guys have where you're holding shotguns?
Oh yes. So there was a brief moment where I was a gun owner, and we just decided to sort of, I guess Pulp Fiction was kind of present in our consciousness at the time, and so that was us doing our best imitation of Pulp Fiction.
That's amazing.
Those are real guns.
That's awesome. They're like, are they loaded?
No,
okay.
No, and we had great trigger discipline.
Oh God, yeah, I don't know anything about that. Guns scare the fuck out of me.
Yeah, I don't have any anymore.
Cool, man. Well, I'll wrap this up because it is
Well, actually, it's like 6:18 for you, so because you're 3 hours behind. But
It's bedtime.
it's bedtime. Bedtime. God damn, 6 o'clock. Um, so okay. So before we go, I have two more questions, and
Okay.
I'll this one before the final one. But what would you like to plug?
Uh, well, I would say the Sickos have. So Ian has a great new band called the Subjunctives, and they just put out an EP on Top Drawer Records. So I would say check that out. And then I would also say check out my and Denny's band with his wife called the Drolls, and we have a single out on Top Drawer Records. I actually didn't play on it, but buy it anyway. Um, and then I would also say if anybody has not checked out the Beths, definitely check out the Beths.
Okay. And the last question is, what scene ethics do you still hold on to this day?
I really try not to be an asshole. It's a daily effort. I have to continually remind myself.
There's I usually will end it there, but so many people have said the same thing. It's so funny that is like the common thread of how people are like, just don't be a dick.
Yeah, just behave well. That's all. I mean, it really, if more people did that, right, it'd make a big difference. But I think that's, just be cool. I mean, the attitude just never does anyone any good.